This is Political Update for Friday, June 13th, here on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com. For those of you who are watching this podcast on your streaming device, be it on our website, on YouTube, on your Roku, or wherever you are downloading your streaming content, what you're watching is a series of images and videos from a demonstration and a protest that broke out, one of the several dozens of demonstrations that have broken out across the U.S. This week in response to President Donald Trump's and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's efforts to arrest and deport allegedly individuals who are allegedly guilty of criminal activities who are, again, allegedly in the United States illegally. I'm Tim Darnell, joined as always by my friend and colleague, Rick Folbaum. And Rick, what we're watching is not any video footage of demonstrations that have happened in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Chicago, or elsewhere, but right here in the metro Atlanta city of Brookhaven, really within walking distance of where I live. It has been just a remarkable week that has been full of drama, legal maneuverings, political intrigue, political drama, and extremely high tensions both on Capitol Hill and throughout the country with no end in sight.
Yeah, I mean, it really has been something to watch. And, while not unprecedented, it has been very sort of highly unusual for a president of the United States to order National Guard troops to protect on U.S. land during a situation like this. Of course, that is usually something that the governor of a state would be calling up the National Guard. But in this case, President Trump did it. He said because Governor Newsom in California was simply not doing the job, President Trump said that he had no choice. But of course, we've watched the scenes play out in California, and now we've seen them this week play out here locally in Brookhaven, as you mentioned. And of course, as we talk here on this Friday the 13th, we are one day ahead of literally more than a dozen planned events and protests that are scheduled to take place here in Georgia on Saturday the 14th, including many in the metro Atlanta area. And so how will all of those protests play out? Will there be any troublemakers the way that there were on Buford Highway a few nights ago? And what will the response be by authorities here, locally where these protests are taking place? And nationally, is this something that the president and his administration are keeping an eye on and perhaps thinking of, if need be, making a similar type of call here in Georgia or elsewhere to bring in National Guard troops? And so it is a very tenuous time. There are a lot of tensions that are playing out, on the streets of the United States and all over as we watch these immigration raids take place. People, immigration agents, federal agents going into workplaces and rounding people up, people who are here in the country illegally, and it's causing a lot of upset in a lot of different communities.
Let's talk about some of the more local reactions to what we've seen. Brookhaven Mayor John Park, who is himself an immigrant and a legal citizen, originally from Southeast Asia, was very vocal in his support of the immigrant community. Buford Highway has long been known for its diversity of businesses stretching from Atlanta into Brookhaven, into Chamblee, and into Doraville, and heading north into Gwinnett County and the community of Norcross. And yet he is facing a very precarious situation in the fact that he really wants to voice his support for the immigrant community, and yet we saw 6 people arrested Tuesday night, at least one Brookhaven police vehicle, windows smashed, graffiti, rocks thrown. This is a very precarious political line that Georgia and Metro Atlanta leaders are having to traverse.
That's right. I think that the mayor in Brookhaven has been quick to point out, as has law enforcement, that the protests in Brookhaven were largely peaceful, that they started off peacefully, and that there really were no issues until the very end when police decided, okay, you've had your chance to protest and now that's over. And then there were just a few stragglers who did not like that and didn't want to stop with their protests, and that's when they resorted to behavior that got them arrested. But yeah, I mean, I think that that there are a lot of elected officials around Georgia and elsewhere who would like to be seen as giving these protesters an opportunity to come out and say their piece. Of course, it is our right as Americans to protest peacefully, but there is a difference between protesting peacefully and, as you said, throwing things at officers and lighting things on fire. That is not protected under the Constitution, and that's the kind of behavior that's going to get people in trouble. And so, you do see, especially as we come up on an election year, a number of politicians who have already announced or who are expected to announce that they're running for office weigh in on all of this, including the Attorney General here, Chris Carr, who of course has thrown his hat into the political ring, coming out and essentially saying that he supports the policies of the Trump administration, and that yes, people have the right to protest peacefully, but when that protest turns to something else, turns to violent behavior, that needs to be shut down.
Let's talk about the Attorney General's response. As you said, he is an announced candidate for governor. He announced his campaign before anyone else that he was going to seek the top job, top elected position here in Georgia. Did so earlier this year or late last year, it could have been. He is so far the only Republican announced candidate for governor. We have several on the Democratic side. Haven't heard any statements of support or opposition from Keisha Lance Bottoms, State Senator Jason Estevez, Pastor Olu Brown, or any on the Democratic side. But the Attorney General, through a one-on-one interview that our own Abby Kasuris did, was very vehement in the fact that anyone who is charged and arrested on charges of domestic terrorism will be prosecuted very vehemently.
Well, I think that's his message, and because he's the only declared Republican in the race, he sort of has the stage to himself, at least in terms of trying to appeal to Republican primary voters. And so coming out with this law and order message, allows him to look strong in the face of these protests that are taking place that have turned violent in Los Angeles, in Brookhaven, and elsewhere around the country. So, I think that it's, politically speaking, it's very smart of the Attorney General to come out early and to start talking about this in a way that, really sort of plants his flag in terms of being the law and order, quote unquote, candidate here in the race for governor. It gives him a chance to sound strong. As far as the other, the Democrats who we have not yet heard from, I think that we'll see what happens with the protests over the weekend and whether this becomes a bigger issue than just 6 people being arrested in Brookhaven. Not to minimize that, but if this does become something bigger, I imagine that all candidates will be asked about this by journalists and will have no choice but to weigh in.
On a national level, and yet still with a Georgia local angle, I don't know if you saw this exchange on Thursday on Capitol Hill between Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and New York Governor Kathy Hochul. Marjorie Taylor Greene, during a House Oversight Committee hearing, apparently New York Governor Kathy Hochul, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, were testifying before a Capitol Hill Oversight Committee. Marjorie Taylor Greene invoked the name of Lincoln Riley, brought a photograph up of Lincoln Riley. She, of course, was the former University of Georgia student who was slain by Jose Ibarra, a Venezuelan immigrant who was in the country illegally. A nationally televised trial and that became a rallying cry for Donald Trump and the Republican Party in 2024. Marjorie Taylor Greene basically said that the governor of New York should be held responsible for Laken Riley's murder. This is just a highly charged political topic with a lot of long range and long-term political implications.
Yeah, Congresswoman Green was talking about transportation that she alleges was provided by the state of New York because of their lenient policies, sort of sanctuary city type policies when it comes to illegals, providing transportation to them. She said that that played a role in the murder of Laken Riley. There is no evidence that we've been able to find that specifically links Jose Ibarra, the man who was convicted of murdering Laken Riley, from benefiting at all from any kind of New York policy that brought him here to Georgia. But nevertheless, it's a very potent political point for someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene and other Republicans to make when they have a chance to question Democratic governors who, again, it can be argued, have been seen by many as being too lenient when it comes to prosecuting people who are here in this country illegally. So yes, it is just a highly charged political issue that played a major role in the 2024 election, of course, and looks like it's going to play another important role in the midterm elections coming up next year.
In one of our very first conversations together here on Political Update, we were talking about the issue of immigration. This is earlier this year in President Trump's administration. And I brought out the parallel that what we saw in 2017 was very similar in the early days of President Trump's first administration, to what we're seeing now. And you brought out the point that it's a correct parallel, but the President Donald Trump's political support in 2017 was perhaps not as strong or valid as it is right now. We're seeing a lot of national polls varying. You can take these for whatever they're worth, varying levels of support among the president's job approval ratings. Some polls are up, others are down. But do you sense that the president's political support is still really solid and valid as we enter into the Donald Trump White House phase 2?
I do. I think, you're going to hear from the occasional Republican saying that perhaps the administration is going too far in its policies and the way that it's carrying out these raids. But I think that on the whole, the Republican base is very much behind the president, very much behind the idea that people who are here in this country illegally, that they must leave. And then go through the process, the legal process of trying to apply to come back to the United States. And that is something that has been, a very good message for President Trump back during his first administration. When he might not have had as strong a support, versus now when he won the election really very handedly, and not only won the electoral vote, but won the popular vote as well, which is something that he was not able to claim after the 2016 election. And so I think that he feels he's got the country behind him. He certainly feels like he has his base behind him. And as long as he doesn't overplay his hand and we don't see federal, U.S. troops, National Guardsmen who were ordered there by President Trump, as long as we don't see them engaging in any kind of, a violent confrontation with protesters, I think if he can avoid that, if we can avoid those types of scenes, I think that the support for these policies by the Trump administration on the whole, certainly by Republicans, will continue.
And so we live in very interesting and dramatic times. We certainly hope that people will continue to peacefully and feel free, we should say, to peacefully express their First Amendment right of free free expression and free speech. Wrapping up this edition of Political Update on Atlanta News First for Friday, June 13th. You mentioned we have more protests scheduled for this weekend. One in downtown Atlanta, to our understanding. This is falling under the banner of the No Kings protests nationwide, happening scheduled for around noontime at Liberty Plaza in downtown Atlanta, right next to the state capitol. What are your thoughts or observations, or what can we expect to see on Saturday? Or we really don't know.
Well, we really don't know, but at the same time, we can hope, that protesters here in Metro Atlanta will take the advice of one of the most famous Atlantans in history, Martin Luther King Jr., and that is to protest peacefully and nonviolently. That is the most potent way of getting a message across, is by not resorting to violence. We saw the summer of social unrest in 2020 when there were protests that began very peacefully downtown, right near the old CNN Center. And there were lots of crowds, lots of police officers, but things were peaceful until they weren't. And I remember covering that story as it was unfolding. And, we were just sort of watching the images, the live pictures from downtown Atlanta, hoping that the protests would stay peaceful. And then, very, very upset with the fact that they didn't. And I just hope that people who are protesting this coming weekend against the Trump administration and its policies and the raids, that they do so peacefully, because again, like I said, that is Martin Luther King Jr. showed that is the best way
Amen.
To make a political point, is not to resort to violence, but rather to remain calm and get your point across that way.
It's a wonderful note to end this edition of Political Update from Atlanta News First. On behalf of Rick Volbaum, thanks for all of you for watching and listening. I'm Tim Darnell. Stay with Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com for all of your late-breaking news and developments on all of the latest political headlines, not only here in Atlanta, Georgia, but throughout the nation. Thank you for watching Political Update from Atlanta News First Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and political updates, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Listen to more of our Political Update podcasts by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.